The best way to predict the future is to create it.
Hello everyone.
A true entrepreneur is a doer, not a dreamer. Entrepreneurship isn't a label, it's a lifestyle.
Wishing you all a delightful evening and a hearty welcome to another electrifying event of the ENI Cell NIT Andhra Pradesh. We honestly hail your passion for attending today's event avidly.
I am Shreyanshi and she is Lehri, host for today's exciting event.
On behalf of ENI Cell NIT Andhra Pradesh, we would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the participants to this webinar. So we are good to begin. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Veeresh Kumar Sir, Associate Dean of Student Affairs, NIT Andhra Pradesh, and Dr. Soumya Jose Ma'am, HOD of School of Humanities and Management, NIT Andhra Pradesh, for giving us this wonderful opportunity to conduct the webinar.
Now, I would request Dr. Premlata Ma'am, Faculty Advisor of E&I Cell NIT Andhra Pradesh, to address the gathering. Is Ma'am there?
Ma'am is facing some technical issues. Sorry to interrupt. She'll join us soon. Please continue.
Okay. Have you ever wondered why you can't take your eyes off from some charismatic public figures?
Today, we have such pronounced speakers with us who can drive us with their words of wisdom throughout this session.
So, we all are going to witness THIAGARAJAN Sir, a prominent seasoned entrepreneur, speaking about entrepreneurship and crisis management. Sir, we are grateful to have you in this program.
THIAGARAJAN Sir is an entrepreneur, technology enthusiast, and a product specialist. He is passionate about designing, building, and taking products into market and making the products into successful businesses. He was in leadership position with world-class product organizations such as Motorola, Qualcomm, and Mobilium.
Riding on the experience of running billion-dollar product organizations, he co-founded Trapure, a cutting-edge corporate travel management solution. Tia is very passionate about product startups and he is a regular speaker at startup forums and leading educational institutions. Tia is an alumnus of Kansas State University and BITS Pilani.
This is truly inspirational journey, sir. Hope our participants will learn a lot from you. All the participants can post their queries in the chat box. We'll take up at the end of the session. We now request THIAGARAJAN Sir to address us.
All right. Thank you guys for the very generous introduction. Really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure to talk to young students like all of you. In fact, all of you inspire me with all your energy and enthusiasm and your great vision for the future. So I thoroughly enjoy talking to students all the time. Today it is my pleasure to share whatever I have learned in my journey as an entrepreneur with all of you. And with your probing questions, I hope to learn more about what more can be done. So without much further ado, let me share a presentation. Just give me a second. So in case, I hope all of you can see my screen. Can somebody acknowledge, please?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. So all of you must be wondering why this topic was chosen. Why entrepreneurship and crisis management? What is the connection? They sound like two different set of things that we're going to talk about. So let me clarify that first, and then we'll move on to the presentation. So my presentation of about 30 minutes will be divided into 4 parts. First, let's talk about what entrepreneurship is, in my own words, what crisis management is, or what the crisis is, and let's understand and come to a common understanding on that. Then let me share with you the different crises that I have managed as an entrepreneur and what I have learned from those things. That's the third part. And finally, I'll summarize with just 4 or 5 key takeaways from this whole experiences that I'm going to be sharing with you. Okay. So now let's see why, I mean, what an entrepreneur is in my own view, right? In my view, an entrepreneur is somebody who creates something out of nothing. So in that sense, an entrepreneur is a creator, because let's say you start a new company, a startup, it did not exist before you started. Once you started, it exists. So you are the creator of this new entity. Or if you were to use an example, it's like giving birth to a new baby. So you are the creator of this new baby called a new company, right? And once you create it, you spend all your time and effort and energy into nurturing that baby, in making sure that company takes shape and grows into something successful. So that's where you will be spending a lot of time. It's again, using the baby example, it's like a mother. The mother forgets about herself for a period of time after childbirth. The first priority becomes the baby, not even herself, right? So a company is exactly like that. You as an entrepreneur will put your company first and you as a next. So in that sense, you are a nurturer. And the last thing is, you have a responsibility to provide an exit to your company. An exit in startup parlance could be, let's say, an acquisition by another company, or it could be the company going public. And once it goes public, it's no longer your company, it's a public company, right? So that's an exit event for you as an entrepreneur. So I'm sure all of you would be seeing where this is going. So in a sense, you are like the Trimurti defined in the Indian religion, Hindu religion, right? So you create, you nurture, and you provide the exit. So it's a big responsibility, big thing that you are doing as an entrepreneur. Now, when you look at what is the single biggest factor that determines the success of an entrepreneur, if you read a lot of journals and magazines and whatnot, you will see that grit is the one word that everybody points to. And what is grit? Grit can be loosely translated or loosely defined as perseverance, the never say give up, never giving up attitude. That is what grit is. So as an entrepreneur, you should not give up. So now let's wonder for a minute, why do they say grit is the single most relevant factor? Important reason being, startup is a risky affair, right? It's for you to start a new company, a new organization is a risky affair. It's like an adventure sport. So if any of you have done something like let's say a skydiving, an adventure sport, it's a risky affair. Anything can happen. Any crisis can develop at any time, right? So as you jump and you try to open your parachute, the parachute may not open. Then they teach you, when you go through the skydiving lessons, in case it doesn't open, then do this. And in case that doesn't happen, do this, right? So you're prepared to deal with any crisis that happens when you are in an adventure sport. So in that sense, being an entrepreneur and developing this grit is all about being prepared to deal with crisis. And we'll see that in just a minute, right? So being an entrepreneur is not all happy things, right? You'll see on the left-hand side, many people decided to become an entrepreneur for all the good reasons, which is correct, which is good. But you should also be prepared to deal with the negative aspects of being, or I shouldn't call it negative, the challenges of being an entrepreneur as well. If you just look at the positives, the great things that will happen, and not the challenges, then you're setting yourself up for failure, right? So very quickly, you would decide to become an entrepreneur because you have freedom, right? You can do what you want. This is your company, so you get to do what you want. But as wise people would say, freedom comes with responsibility. You can't do anything you want. You need to be responsible, right? And at the same time, you are your own boss. That's a great thing. If you work for a company, you are governed by what your boss likes, what your boss doesn't like. You're trying to please your boss. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're doing things your way, right? You're your own boss. But the flip side of that is the buck stops here. You need to take ownership of whatever happens to your company. Whatever decisions you're making, you need to take ownership. Sometimes you make good decisions, sometimes you make bad decisions. So you have to really face up to it, right? And finally, you get to enjoy all the success. You may make millions or billions of dollars by being an entrepreneur. That's the success story that we hear about. But if you look at the statistics, for every successful company that we read about, every Byju's, every Paytm that we read about, there are hundreds of companies that die, that do not make it, that just shut down without any kind of success. So it's not just about the success and the glory, but you need to be ready to face any failures as well, right? So it's a mixed bag. So now that we have seen what or who an entrepreneur is, let's see what crisis is, because that's the topic of our discussion today. So if you look up crisis in dictionary, it's defined as a time of great danger or difficulty. The moment when things change and either improve or get worse. This is what a crisis is, right? So this is very, very relevant to a startup or an entrepreneur, because when you start something out of nothing, your journey is going to be filled with crisis, just like a baby. Again, I'll keep going back to that example. When you have a baby and when you have to bring the baby up, the first few months will be nerve-wracking for new parents. Of course, all of you are young, you're not parents, maybe not a good example to speak in this forum, but nonetheless, hopefully you'll be able to relate to it. So a new parent is petrified when a new baby is born, because you don't know what to do. There is no user's manual. There is no do this, don't do this. When this happens, you're not prepared for dealing with any crisis. And crises are aplenty when it comes to babies, and the same with new companies as well. When you're an entrepreneur, you are going to be facing crisis day in and day out. And what kind of crisis? They can be looked at from different angles. I've just listed some 4 different angles. It could be internal or external. Internal is where the crisis happened because of your company, your organization. Let's say you made a bad decision to hire somebody, and that person doesn't perform, or he screws up, he does something really bad. That's an internal crisis. Or it could be an external crisis. Like, let's say the pandemic happened. You started with your own intention, but something else happened, and it's beyond your control. So that's an external crisis. But you have to deal with it as an entrepreneur, right? It could be self-inflicted, or it could be caused by others as well. So you may make a mistake, and because of that, you face a crisis. Or somebody else may cause it. Maybe your competitor will do some nasty move and try to kill you. That's a crisis that we need to deal with, right? Similarly, it could be localized or it could be global. So let's say a few years ago, let's say there were floods in Chennai, right? Let's say your company was located in Chennai, and let's say your office was flooded. That's a localized crisis that you need to deal with. Or it could be a global crisis, like the pandemic that we are all going through, right? So that is the other thing. And the other thing could be, it could be personal, or it could be universal. So it may affect only you, only your company, or only you, or it could be a universal crisis that everybody is going through in your industry. So let's say if there is a crisis with, let's say, travel, which we went through. By the way, the company that I run is called TripYour, and we do corporate travel. So we were impacted very severely during the pandemic, early days of pandemic, let's say last March and April, right? But not only us, all the travel companies were impacted. So that's a universal problem that everybody is trying to solve. So, but the important thing is, crisis is something that will keep on coming to you. So you need to be ready to deal with it. Now, very briefly, the kind of crisis that you would have could be internal to your company, and it will show up in the form of, let's say, product. Let's say your product crashed. I'm from a software background, so I'm just going to take software, or maybe we'll take a more universal example. You would keep reading about some cars getting recalled. They have a faulty part, so they have to recall thousands or even lakhs of cars back because there is a fault. There's a serious fault. So this is a product crisis that you have to deal with, right? It will impact your bottom line very big. So you have to be able to deal with it. Even big companies deal with that. Or it could be employees. Maybe one of your employees would quit. One of your critical employees may quit or may die or may sue you for something bad that may have happened, right? These are crises that you have to deal with. Or funds. Maybe your funds will run out. Maybe you'll be facing bankruptcy. So these are all internal problems that you have that are pretty much under your control, but internal to you. Or it could be external problems that your company faces. It could be a customer, maybe a big customer, number one customer that you have that's giving you, let's say, 60% of your business, suddenly decides to switch to some other competitor of yours. What do? That's an external crisis that you have to deal with it, right? Or an investor. I have a friend, for example, who had a bad investor. After 2 years, the investor said, "Give me my money back." Legally, he cannot ask, but he started pestering my friend, saying, "I want my money back." What do? So this is another external problem. Or it could be a branding issue, right? Your brand may be tarnished because of whatever crisis that is happening. So take a look at Boeing, for example, right? When the Boeing Max got grounded, that's also a product problem. But because of that, there was a very negative view of Boeing among all the airlines, right? So this is something that you have to deal with. Your brand got tarnished, so you have to figure out what to do. And you can also relate to another thing. For example, when Saurav Ganguly recently had a heart problem, he was advertising for an oil company, and suddenly there was a problem with branding. If you have this oil, maybe you will have. My point is, crisis can show up in any form: internal, external, market-facing, local, global, anything. And we need to be prepared to deal with it, right? So that's the most important thing. Now, having given you the background, let's switch to the core thing that I wanted to share with you based on my experience. And hopefully you can pick up a thing or two about the mistakes that I made and what I learned. And hopefully you won't make the same mistakes in your life, right? So here are 7 points that I have listed. I'll give you some anecdote about each one of those. Each one was a crisis for me at different points in life. I've been running this company for about 5 years now. In 5 years, I've gone through, probably, tens of crises. When I say crisis, real crisis, it's not just a simple problem, like there is a small bug in the software, but a major problem. A customer is saying, "I'm going to walk out if it doesn't get fixed in the next 1 hour." That kind of a problem, right? So I've just picked 7 of them that I want to share with you today. First one is when we started early on, 5 years ago. Many of you may not remember it. Myntra, one of the successful companies that was acquired by Flipkart later, they made a bold decision to go mobile only. They said our software or our e-commerce website will not be available from browsers. You have to access it from mobile only, right? I was very impressed with it. They were publishing some statistics and so on, and I thought, wow, this is the future. When I start a company, I need this and this only. So when I started, I did this without really caring about what customers want. Is this relevant for my market? Is this relevant for my customers? I never looked at that. I just said, this is cool. This is something nice to do. Let me just go ahead and do it. And boy, it backfired. So we got into a crisis mode. We launched the product as a mobile app initially. But in 6 months, the usage was so limited. Whoever started enthusiastically, they gave up after some time. Customers started moving away. They were not using our products. So then we went into a crisis mode because we had invested heavily into a mobile-only kind of an architecture. So we had to kind of backtrack and start building a web-based solution. We picked up and we built the product from the ground up again on a web platform later. So this is one kind of crisis when customers just walk away. You need to really figure out what you need to do and react. And sometimes you may be able to react without getting hurt, and sometimes you may get hurt. Your revenues will go down, your customers will go away, but you can't give up. You need to really keep going, right? So that is one little crisis. The next thing is we had a decision to make about whether in-house, build the product in-house, or should we build it, should we outsource it? And initially we thought it'll be easier to outsource and go about it that way. But we had some serious problems. We had given it to a company, and that company produced code. We had promised customers this product is going to be released on so-and-so date. And the date came, but the product was far from complete. Too many problems, too many issues, and we couldn't do anything. It'll take a long time to fix those problems. There were disagreements and so on. And so it became a major crisis. We lost those customers. We had 2-3 customers waiting for that product. And at that time, we had to just give up and restart. Right? So this is another crisis that we had to deal with. And we, at that time, corrected our mistake. Instead of outsourcing, we started building the product in-house from that point onwards. Similarly, when we signed up the initial customers, all of you would have heard about these terms, especially if you're interested in entrepreneurship. There are 2 terms that come to mind. You need to focus on MVP, stands for minimum viable product. Don't build a big, complete product, but build a basic product and take it to market. And once you take it, keep working on it until you find something called product market fit, right? So this is the standard playbook that most startups go by. And so we did the same thing. We built the initial product, MVP, gave it to a few customers. Then based on their feedback, we were kind of developing the product, right? But the initial customers turned out to be bad representation of the market. So that's another area where we went wrong. So we went to some of the friends of ours and just signed up whoever we could at that time. And that turned out to be a mistake. We did not do it in a scientific fashion, saying, here is my target market. Here are the customers that represent that target market. Let's start with that. That should have been the approach. But we started with the early adopters who were in our circle and who misled us. And again, we reached a crisis point where when we went to real big customers, the product that we had was not at all a fit for them. We had to reinvent the product again. We had to kind of go back to the drawing board and build different modules that the real customers were asking. So it was like a time lost for us, right? The next thing, this is a very serious crisis that we went through. We went this close to kind of shutting shop at some point, because in the eagerness to grow the business, we ignored this thing called cash flow, right? So technically we had a lot of money with us. Our net cash position was good, but most of the money was stuck with customers. Customers were not paying in time. And at the same time, we had to pay our suppliers on time. So we got squeezed. At some point, our bank balance came close to zero. And we didn't know how we were going to do payroll the following month. This was a massive crisis. So we somehow got over that. We didn't say we'll shut shop or anything, but we said, okay, let's figure out how to not pay some of the employees, how to conserve cash, how to push some of the customers to pay up right now, maybe at a discount, but take the money now rather than getting full money later, right? So we employed different techniques, different approaches, and somehow got out of this. So never get into this crisis. This is very, very important. do not get into a cash flow crisis. And the next kind of crisis we went through is our first 2 rounds of funding came pretty easily. Within 6 months of starting to raise funding, we got funding, right? So we got pampered. We thought, oh, funding should be easy. You just show results and investors will come and give you money. And with that expectation, we started spending money. And we assumed that we'll get money in 6 months, but it never happened the next time around. And again, we got into a point where, money was running out and we had to continue. We had customers, we had a great product, and we had great prospects as well, but we were not profitable yet. So what do? We had to solve this problem. Of course, we went back and solved the problem. We raised some money as debt and this and that, and somehow, tide it over this crisis. But that is the other kind of crisis that you will come across. So you need to really be conservative when it comes to when you can expect money from the next round of investment. You cannot take it for granted, right? And the next one is a crisis that was caused by hiring some wrong employees, right? So I had made a fair share of my mistakes in this department. We had hired a couple of employees, pretty good employees, but at some point things were not working out, right? We had to part ways, but it turned out to be a bad split. And that started hurting, not only in terms of losing an employee, a valuable employee, but that employee would start hurting you by bad-mouthing you in the market, right? So it becomes a double whammy. So when you make a bad hire, first of all, you lose time. You could have hired somebody good and you could have grown in a different way. They could have produced much better results. So you lost time, that is one. But when they leave on a bad note, it becomes a double whammy. They can go and hurt your existing business also. So that became a problem that we had to solve by going and figuring out how to counter whatever damage that was being caused. So that is another kind of crisis that you would come across. And of course, the mother of all crisis hit us last year in the form of COVID-19. As I said earlier, we're a travel company. And imagine you're growing at a very nice pace, month on month. You have just raised funding and you're growing very nicely. And suddenly one fine day, that revenue comes down to zero, right? That's exactly what happened to us. So this is a real massive crisis. So what do? You have hired tens of employees who are ready to deliver, good employees, but the market is gone. Employees can't do anything. It's a massive crisis worldwide. What do? Right? So we had to take a lot of steps to come out of this particular crisis. I'll just talk about 2 or 3 of them. Number one, you had to cut costs, because if the future is bleak or if the future is unclear, it is not clear when this is going to come back and what is going to happen, how quickly it will come back, how fast it will come back. If you're not sure, then the first thing you need to do is conserve cash, right? So that's what we did. And number 2, if you have any non-critical things that you're focusing on right now, because when you're growing, you are not only focusing on your core, but you're also looking at some growth kind of prospects, both in terms of product, in terms of sales, business development, marketing, and so on. So you need to cut all that. You have to come back to your core. What is your core? And come back to that. And that also applies to employees, right? So you need to really focus on who the core team is and start focusing on that. And that also applies to who your core customers are. Which customers do you want to really focus on at this time and not get, let's say, distracted by anybody that you don't want to keep, right? And while doing this, we also had to figure out, what if travel doesn't pick up? What do we do as a backup? What are the adjacent areas that you can go to? Should we pivot out of this? Should we do something else? So we had to do all these things with a mixture of all different steps we took, we were able to tide over this crisis as well. And today, our business is back. It's growing at a very nice pace, and we are ready to go back to the good old days. But much more, I would say, wiser and much more grounded. And so we are ready to take on any new challenges that would come to us. So the important thing is crises are not bad. In case you're thinking, oh man, I don't want crisis. I don't want to deal with bad stuff. It's not so. Crises are actually good. They are actually teaching you what not to do. By making mistakes, you learn how to deal with these problems so that the next time you are faced with it, you are able to deal with it in a much better way. So that way, I am not regretting any of the mistakes that I have made, or nor am I, let's say, unhappy about having wasted time dealing with all this crisis, making mistakes, and so on. It's all good. It will lead us to a better place. And now, just to conclude, I would just sum up these 5 points. If you are wondering, what are my takeaways? If I want to become an entrepreneur and I want to be best prepared to deal with crisis, what are the, let's say, top points that I need to keep in mind? So number 1, I just mentioned, you need to remember that no pain, no gain. So if you want to build a great company, you're not going to do it by doing all the right things. If you have not made mistakes, if you have not faced a downturn in your business, then you're probably not realizing your full potential, right? So no pain, no gain. So crisis is good, but obviously you don't want to create crisis every day, right? If it's a few happening here and there, and every time a new crisis that you're creating, it's fine. But don't get into the same crisis again and again. Learn, make yourself better, deal with new crisis, right? The second thing is, as you face crisis, it's kind of related to the first point, expect the unexpected. Always be prepared for a crisis. Do not take anything for granted. Of course, you will make plans. You will say, this is how I'm going to build a product. This is how I'm going to grow the business. These are the customers I'm going to work with. But don't count on anything. Your product will crash at the most unexpected time. Some of you may know kind of a funny but weird incident. Bill Gates was giving a demo of the next version of Windows. I forgot which version it is, Windows 95 or Windows, I don't know, one of those versions. And guess what? It was in a big conference. I think it was CES, the biggest consumer electronics show out there. And he was proudly unveiling the new operating system. And guess what happened on stage? Blue screen. The dreaded blue screen of Windows showed up. What do you do? It happens. So expect the unexpected. You should be prepared to deal with such unexpected things happening to you. And next thing is, whenever crisis hits you, it is very easy to get completely distracted, right? To go all over the place. Whenever a crisis hits you, when I say crisis, you feel like, oh my God, my company is going to shut down. I am going to lose everything. Suppose you hit that point, it is very important to really separate things into 2 buckets. Things that are under your control and things that are not under your control. Things that are not under your control. So for example, take pandemic. Do I have control over when pandemic will get over? Do I have control over vaccination? Do I have control over when people will want to travel? No, I can't really do anything about it. But whatever is under my control, let's say my product, my customers, my employees, these are things that I have under my control. So what can I do with these things that are under my control and focus on that? Do not focus on the uncontrollable things and lose sleep over it, because it's not going to help you in any way, right? That's the third thing. And the next thing is, never give up. Fourth and fifth are very similar, but never give up. It is for every successful unicorn, there are thousands of companies that shut down. every day companies are shutting down, right? Startups. People start with a dream, but they give up easily, right? They give up at the first sign of trouble, first sign of crisis. Never give up. If you really want to make it, you need to develop this thing called grit, as I mentioned earlier, right? So just keep at it. Maybe you will pivot to some different solution. Maybe you will do things differently, but never give up. You need to keep going at it, because only with perseverance you will get to a good place in the entrepreneur's journey. And last but not the least, whenever you feel like this is it, there is nothing else I can do, just remember this one: there is always a solution. To any problem, there is always a solution. You may not like the solution, you may not want to face the solution, but there is always a solution. You just need to find it, and you need to get comfortable with that solution. So, for example, if let's say your company is, let's say, running out of money, it's not like you have to shut down. You can always sell the company. You can always license your product to somebody else, right? But there is always a solution. You may not like it. It may not be the ideal solution that you are looking for, but you just need to find it and develop comfort around it. So these are the things that I just wanted to share with you guys. I hope it was at least a little bit useful. And I am open to any questions that you may have. And before I hand it over to the team, I wish you all the best. Any of you that want to be an entrepreneur, want to have your own journey, it is exciting. It is like an adventure sport, right? Do accidents happen? Yes. But is it worth it? Many of us really make it, right? Do you learn something out of it? Do you become a better person? Absolutely. So I highly recommend it. Here to help. Any of you need any help, you can always feel free to reach out to me. And I wish you all the best. Over to you guys.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking speech. You stimulated us with your elucidate talk. We are greatly inspired with this topic after your amazing speech.
Now it's time for the question answer session. We know that you guys are waiting for your queries to be resolved. Here we go.
Sir, we have a first question, which is asked by Mr. Adnan. He wants to know what was your motivation during the entrepreneurial journey?
Okay, good question. So the motivation was very simple. Most entrepreneurs start this way. I faced a problem and I wanted to solve it. While I was working for Motorola, Qualcomm, Romware, and so on, I used to travel a lot for business. When I traveled, it was a pain. I had to deal with so many people. People would get it wrong, wrong seat, wrong meal, wrong type of hotel, and so on. And I thought there should be a better way, and technology should be able to help in solving this problem. And I searched and I couldn't find anybody else solving it. So I thought, okay, let me go solve it. So that was my motivation.
Thank you, sir, for your answer. Sir, there is a question from my side. Sir, can there be any measures which can be taken in order to avoid this crisis situations?
It's, yes, you can do a little bit, but crises do happen. It's like saying, can you do something to never fall sick? Can anybody give a magic formula? No, you can do your best. You can eat healthy. You can sanitize yourself and, be clean and take some precautions and so on. But is there anybody who has never fallen sick? No, right? So that way, I would say crisis will happen. If you are running a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, crisis will happen. But to minimize it, number one, you need to be prepared to deal with crisis. Don't be shocked when some crisis situation happens. By the way, pretty much all the successful companies, whether it's an Airbnb or a Uber or any large company, they've all gone through this thing called near-death experience. They've all gone through crisis. And then they have bounced back. So you can be extra cautious, but then if you're being extremely conservative, then you're not going to be aiming for a large company, right? You're going to build a very basic, mediocre kind of company because you'll be risk averse. So when you take risk, by definition, you're going to invite crisis situations.
Thank you, sir, for your provocative answer. So we have another question from Guru Saranya. She wants to know what is the best way to approach targeted audience.
Approach targeted audience. I actually don't understand the question clearly. If you're talking about target customers, if
Yes,
you're trying
sir.
to figure out who your target audience is, if that's what it is, let's say I was talking about product market fit. We're trying to figure out who my market is. It's see, there is a nice book called Lean Startup, that describes this. But the thing is, you start with a hypothesis, right? You will say, here is a target market for which there is this problem that I'm going to solve. Then you put a solution out there with a representative group and validate whether that is correct or wrong. You get feedback and then go back to the next set. Depending on the feedback, if it tells you, yes, this is the target market, then you go back with the revised solution and improve. But if you find out that, no, this is not the target audience, then you expand to a different audience. And keep repeating this experiment very quickly, like in 2-week, 3-week, 4-week kind of cycles. And once you reach a point where you feel comfortable, oh, this is the market, then you have arrived at it. This is what is typically tried in the startup circles.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable answer. So we have a last question, which is asked by Mr. Venkat. He wants to know what are the things that we need to take care at the time of hiring a person.
Excellent question. So I can tell you from my experience, it's the more important than, let's say, talent and qualifications is that employee or potential employees' attitude towards working in an uncertain environment. So their ability to deal with uncertainty. So are they risk takers? Can they be entrepreneurs? That is what is more important. So even though they may be, let's say, a little less than the most excellent candidate out there, but if they are willing to go the extra mile, willing to take that risk, you should hire that person rather than the best performing person who cannot tolerate risk. So I would put this as the number one criterion that you should use.
Thank you, sir, for the answer. Sir, we have few more questions. Can we go?
Yeah, please. I have another 10 minutes. Yes.
So Mr. Yugnath is asking, is diversifying the way forward or concentrating on a particular field?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, sir. Is diversifying the way forward or concentrating on a particular field?
So when you're an entrepreneur, it's better to concentrate. Focus is much better than diversification. You take one thing and do that one thing very well. You don't want to do 10 things and be average in 10 things. It's not going to take you anywhere. Right? So don't diversify. Diversification will come later. Once you have reached a level of success, then you diversify. So just to give you an example, you take, let's say, Ola, right? Ola was focused on transportation, but now they're into Ola Money, they're into Ola Food and whatnot, right? But initially, should they have done Ola Money? No. They focused only on the transportation problem, right? So you should focus rather than diversify early on.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we have another question from Mr. Suman. He wants to know what should an entrepreneur listen to, his heart or his mind?
It's a difficult one. It's usually, see, entrepreneurs are usually driven by heart. They call them fools. Entrepreneurs are fools. It's because, you try to do the impossible. You have dreams that are impossible from a normal person's perspective. So in that sense, you need to dream with your heart, right? You don't want to dream with your mind. That will be very limiting. Dream with your heart, dream with your passion. But when it comes to making decisions, make decisions with your mind. You need to really take data into account. Don't decide because your heart tells you to. I like this person, so let me hire this person. You don't want to do that, right? You need to use analytical abilities before you make decisions. Hope that answers.
Thank you, sir, for the answer.
Thank you, sir, for answering all our queries and making this a wonderful event. It's a privilege for us to hear all your experiences and knowledge. We hope that your association with ourselves continues even in the future. Thanks a lot, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed it very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.